providing gifts to all the participants, and I think we'll probably do that right before lunch. So all the speakers, if you come see me, we'd be happy to get those to you. And I'd like now to turn the panel over to Mr. Gene Seymour, so he can start to moderate the panel. It's all yours, guys.
Can we close the door or have conversations continue outside? Thank you. How much time do we have on? I saw this on 12:15. Okay, in order to respect everyone's schedule, we'll have a bit of an abbreviated session. What you have witnessed previously was what we would call the elevator speech, or the teaser. So that is what the GP initiates the contact with potential investors with a 1 or 2 page document that is supposed to highlight the attractiveness of the particular fund that they are marketing. It is to attract attention to be able then to have a meeting. And that meeting is what we will be discussing now, the due diligence process, and what the investors will be looking at, the different aspects of the fund to make a determination whether it suits their particular portfolio strategy and whether they find that the manager is acceptable to their standards. Due diligence, I spent 4 years in the Navy in submarines, and those who are sailors know that they term it triangulation. And due diligence is a form of triangulation. And what that is you take bearings on a fixed point, a series of bearings, create lines to, and at the center is a triangle. What that triangle represents is that you are somewhere within that triangle, but it is not a specific dot. And what you try to do in due diligence is make that triangle as small as possible, which really means trying to eliminate as many of the variable factors or unknowns that you can, recognizing that you will never eliminate all the unknowns. You will never eliminate all the uncertainties. So your effort is really to try to make that degree of uncertainty as small as possible. I want to spend a couple minutes now just talking a little bit about the background and where we are, as I see it, in Vietnam and how we got there, and what experiences in Asia or indeed globally can be brought to bear here as we think about investing with managers in Southeast Asia in private equity. My private equity experience began in 1983 in Taiwan. The fact of the matter is, I didn't know it was private equity. I was a banker for a major New York bank. I was senior country officer, and one of my major customers was a large white goods or household appliance manufacturer in Taiwan. We had loans out to them. He overextended himself. The loans went bad, and I found myself in his office, the chairman, who was about 30 years older than I was. I was, of course, considerably younger in 1983. And I found I was advising him on how he should restructure his company. And what I found were some major cultural differences that I think may apply here as well. You all will know better. First of all, this is a family-owned company. The owner started the company after World War II. He built it up into a very, very successful Taiwanese company, and indeed something of a global export basis as well. But his whole motivation was to be big. So when I talked about profitability as opposed to revenues, it wasn't registering. He wanted to increase his revenues. That's what he thought was success. And I was trying to argue that, look, your profitability has been declining. You are doing too many things. You're adding on products that aren't earning a profit. There's another aspect of the business that he built up, and that had to do with what we would now call social impact. He invested a lot of money in a university, his own university, if you will, in athletic fields, in hospitals. And these were all within the perimeter of his company. He invited all of his bankers, all of his vendors, every year to an annual track meet. And if you can picture, it's difficult to picture, but I can picture it vividly. I was asked to run 3 miles in competition around this track that we built. And being a foreigner, I was expected to do that. I tried to get out of it. I'm a sprinter, not a long distance runner. And my staff, being time with me, said, "Oh, no, you have to do this." So I did. I went out there. I barely finished. As a sprinter, I just can't do long distances. But that was a culture that he had built in. And I bring it up because I suspect that there may be similarities here into how businesses today operate in Southeast Asia. The rest of my private equity career, in 1993, I started investing in private equity managers in Asia. At that time, in 1993, Southeast Asia was the place to invest, in Taiwan. Very little was being done in China, and that which was being done, people were losing money. Nothing was really being done by institutional investors in Japan. In fact, nothing was being done in Australia and New Zealand. Nothing was being done in Korea. This was the place. Now, you may remember a comment earlier this morning about investing against growth, GDP growth, and the correlation between investing private equity for GDP growth areas and the returns. Well, the whole premise of investing here in those times in 1993 through the end of that decade was to invest in GDP growth. The private equity managers would acquire 10-15% equity and then just sit back. They would have a seat on the board, but no real influence, and sit back and expect the company to grow as it had in the previous 10 years or so from GDP growth. However, in 98, 99, the crisis came, the growth collapsed, and the private equity managers found that they had no influence then over the direction of the company going forward. And that was a real learning experience. After that, the market moved north, and the investment in Southeast Asia really consolidated to far less. Now we're coming back another cycle, and a country like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos has opened up, and there are new investment opportunities. I think what we need to learn, though, is from the experiences of the past, how those investments should be done, and how managers should be organizing themselves and managing the investment process. And that's what we're going to be talking about in terms of the due diligence of those managers and the ability to do that. So you've met the panelists already. And I will start just by asking the panelists the broad categories that I would see in doing due diligence on a manager would be areas like the strategy. First thing, what is the strategy of the manager? Does that strategy fit my portfolio? The team, talk a bit about the team. I'd like to talk some more in depth about the team, the track record, and alignment of interest. I think we need to talk a lot more about alignment of interest. We have very limited time. We're not going to cover everything. It's a wide topic. But starting, I'm hung on if I can start with you. And if you could describe strategies, how do you decide that a strategy of an investment manager is of interest to you?
Strategy is for us, strategy of the fund manager is for us probably one of the key considerations to implement it. Every LP has different approaches and different limitations. Now, the bank I work for, we deliberately chose to have one office, and the office is far away from the Netherlands. We don't have local expertise or local knowledge in-house. We don't speak the local language. So what we're looking for is a partner, Auxesia, that we can rely on, that they can do the field work and has to be complementary to what we as a company do. So we don't necessarily look at systems or controls. We can bring that. We can also bring money, of course. What we're looking at is a fund manager that has a strategy based on local content. They should guide us what will work, what will not work in this country.
And how do you assess what that local content is?
Well, it's a track record. What have they done in the past? Were they successful in that? And most of it, I mean, obviously, in all the pitches, you hear the high IRRs they score on their specific transactions. But what you actually want to hear is the story that they play. That's why they learn the lesson. So Actually, what we're saying is, where did you lose money and how did it happen? Because for sure, it's not going to do it again, that mistake.
So what you're saying, and Kim, I'm asking you to elaborate on it, you analyze the track record to assess the strategy. You analyze the track record to determine what were the elements of success or failure. And describe some of the things that experiences that you've had in that in analyzing portfolio managers. Sorry, that was for Kim.
So now that I will go back to, actually before I answer that question, can I just comment on something that you said? If you can't answer the question that's been posed, answer the question that you want to answer. Because I think when people ask about what strategies are of interest to LPs, there's one important point that I think GP should keep in mind. Some LPs have a view. They'll say, okay, in China, I want to go into growth capital, and so forth, right? In Japan, Australia, Korea, looking for buyout. But at the end of the day, when you meet with a GP, it's not whether you have the right strategy, but what is your strength and your skill set, and how good are you at implementing it to make money and make returns. So you can't fit the strategy, the trend of the strategy to try to attract the LP. You have to exploit your skills to say, that is why this is my strategy, if that makes sense. And I'm sorry, now I've forgotten your question.
Well, as you know, as you find in due diligence, things go back and forth between these different broad categories that I was trying to have us focus on, try to put some organization to this, but it doesn't work. So I was talking about, Hong Wang was talking about the track record as a determinant or a way to assess the strategy.
Well, we
A little punchy here. Yes, track record obviously plays a role, but what I think what a lot of investors who aren't sitting in these markets lose sight of is the iterative nature of the due diligence process and evaluating managers. Because I've sat and really listening, because I've sat in pitches before where a manager said, we're a mezzanine fund. Because once again, they're looking for a term that resonates with investors. And then they start talking about their track record. And then they start talking about the transactions they've done. And we're like, no, you're not mezzanine. You're just simply structured finance and with a little bit of equity on the side. Or, we're a pure private equity investor. And they talk through their strategy and what they've done, because they're looking to communicate terminology that is easily processed by individuals who don't really necessarily understand the market.
But I thought I heard Jim saying that's what you wanted earlier panel, saying use terms that resonate with LPs.
But maybe know who you are as well, so that you can articulate with the right terms. So another pure private equity manager in India is able to put 25% of his portfolio into publicly traded stocks, and also has an approach to investing which is not pure growth capital, buy them and build them. They're actually more of a special situations fund. And so strategy, you've got to start talking to the team. And then you've got to sort of sort it out. And there's no straightforward way to do that except to spend a lot of time with these individuals.
Once you think you understand the strategy, then how important is it to you that strategy has been executed consistently? And what do you do when the manager says, well, this is what we've done. We think that there's an opportunity in another area that we are going to pursue. How do you address that?
I mean, analyzing the track record is a bit tricky. So the point that Ronnie's making, I think, you say that this is your strategy, and when you actually analyze the track record, it's quite different from the stated strategy. And I'll use the example of Vietnam. I first came to Vietnam in 2006 when I was an LP for Shinsei Bank. And private equity was just starting. So there were about 20 managers, of which I would say maybe 20% were in real estate, and 10% was in true private equity, and the remaining was really pre-IPO. So when I met with a lot of these funds, they all said, we're a private equity fund manager, and this is what we do. We invest in these companies, and this is how we get the value. This is where we entered, and this is where we're going to exit. When you realize that they've done nothing in the true private equity sense, so analyzing that track record is very important in terms of the value add that they've put into these companies. Now, there are pre-IPO funds, so their strategy is actually pre-IPO, it's not private equity. So I think it's important to make a differentiation between what they're saying they're doing and the manager knowing what their true skill sets are, and then how that fits with what the track record reveals.
So how about taking that point further in terms of the analysis of the portfolio of companies and creation of value? What do you ask for from the manager other than the routine cash-on-cash multiple of a company that they invested in and exited? What more do you ask for to enable you to analyze how they created value in that company?
Well, it's all lingo. We have something like a value bridge. You can analyze where the value came from. I mean, a multiple arbitrage, you buy for five times property, you sell for 8 times profit. They're not creating that much value. You generate value, but it's not generated by a fund manager. It's arbitrage you want.
Do they not get points for being in the market at the right time?
No, you just have to bear in mind what LP you talk to. I mean, if you're a development finance institution, you care about creating value. We generally don't like to do secondary transactions. So buy existing shares, either direct or indirect by our fund managers. What we like to see is deploy capital in the companies to make it grow or create buy a build platform or whatever. But that's what this LP, what I work for, wants to do. I mean, it might be entirely different what's in our house.
It's very interesting to me to have studied the private equity market globally in the United States of how the value creation changed over the decades depending on financial markets. And back in the early 80s, private equity was the roll up the sleeves, operations management, improvement, really the nitty-gritty of creating value in a company. And then in the boom market, the stock market, it became multiple arbitrage. You could buy a company now and sell it 4 years later. The market had expanded, market multiples has expanded. And you sell and make good money, but it was multiple arbitrage. And then we have the credit, the access to credit. And financial returns came from leverage. And so then it became financial engineering. After that, after the credit markets collapsed, I believe we are going back to what private equity really was all about. So private equity is returning to its roots of the roll up the sleeve, create and build value through improvement of the operations of the funds. So as we think about how the market here in Southeast Asia is going to develop going forward, I would encourage people to think about that, and therefore I want to now shift the conversation to the expertise and experience of the team and what you look for in that experience in the team. Start with you, Ron.
That's obviously critical because I was at a private equity conference a couple of weeks ago, and a GP said it so beautifully. You're not buying the asset class. You know, people can talk about where returns going in India, you know, where returns going in China and Southeast Asia.
But the one thing we all know is that the dispersion of returns is huge, and there's a little bit at the top, a lot at the bottom, and not much in between. So, and that speaks to talent and expertise of the team. So what we always look for is not one or two exceptional individuals, but exceptional individuals at all levels of the firm, which really sort of narrows the playing field.
What do you mean by exceptional? Exceptional in what?
Exceptional financial skills, operational skills, anything that's going to help that GP be that value-added partner that a portfolio company should have. And that can be, depending on the market that you're in, you may need Sigma 6 people on your team, or auditors and accountants, or you may need people who are more focused on the financial analysis side. That also has to align with the current development of a given market. So,
do you like consultants as
Consultants.
consultants?
Consultants.
That's private.
That's private equity. Do you like consultants?
You're a consultant. I mean, bringing the topic of consultant, this is disclaimer. It's not. I'm not referring only to Vietnamese fund managers or fund managers in the room. In general, for us, a fund manager is a consultant. Because if you really think about it, you're putting money at work. You never invest in the fund manager. You invest with the fund manager. He manages your money. There's nothing more, nothing less. He calls himself, normally in agreement, suddenly your fund manager calls himself an advisor. But it implies he's actually not much downward risk sitting there. You have to be very careful to test whether the strategy, team, and performance in the past is consistent. Is the story that has been told the first day, the first page of the presentation, the same in the last part of the presentation? Now, I've met fund managers in Vietnam that has teams exceedingly talented, bright people, very bright people. Also, fund managers that are more optimistic and have less skill set than that. But it is about consistency, and it is about is the story genuine, what it's called? Does it match with the track record? It doesn't have to be 50% RR in Fund 1, and Fund 2 also comes to 50%.
but in terms of consultants, there is a difference. And I hope I don't offend too many people in the room. I'll probably offend some, but the large global consulting firms that have extremely young people with no experience giving large corporations, some of which I've worked for, advice. I've seen a lot of money go out the door, but I haven't seen a lot of value creation. So I don't get excited about teams of private equity investors that are coming out of McKinsey or Bain or Boston Consulting or whatever these groups are. Maybe let's look for one person on the team so you get your PowerPoint presentations. but on the flip side, yes, you're right. You're right that a GP is a consultant to their portfolio companies effectively. But if they have, instead of management consultants, if they have a guy who successfully ran one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in India, or was involved in a business, or a big consumer, Procter and Gamble, and actually has operating experience, I think that's a whole different type of consulting value-added service that a manager brings. So I think when you evaluate teams and their makeup, you do have to differentiate. So.
I just want to make sure that we're not clubbed to death if you leave this room. How many GPs are in the room? None? Oh. Is that all? Oh, I mean, those GPs in the room probably have a better labor contract, better employment contract than I have. Do I realize that?
Wait, you employ them?
Pardon?
You're employing them?
Yes, but they have a labor contract, normally, a fund manager for 10 years, an extension of 2 years.
Which you're paying for?
They cannot be fired, they cannot be,
Sorry, there's no fault divorce. I've never signed an LPA without a no fault divorce clause. Maybe FMO has, but
yeah, if I look at mine, I mean, my contract can be terminated every year. They have not, unless it is gross negligence.
well, no, it doesn't have to be gross negligence. That's why you have no fault divorce. So
How many-
usually there's a 2-year. I've signed up to a 2-year moratorium period at the onset of the fund where we can't fire the manager. But after that, if we get the requisite number of votes, we can fire the manager very easily. And it's all prescribed for in the documentation in terms of carry that you take away from them, carry that leave on the table, et cetera, et cetera. And I've invoked it at least twice in my career.